Welcome, welcome to your class number 3 on the Sun and Mercury integrated work or integrated expression. Excited to continue on our learning and experiential healing and astrology integrated journey. And this is your intermediate astrology for integrated healing work 2019, of course. And we are continuing with another pairing, if you'd like, and integration key that I have found very essential and helpful in understanding how some of these essential aspects of us are functioning and how we tend to over-identify with one of them and we tend to disown and or project the other one. So you may already have an idea how and which one that may be in your case between the Sun and Mercury. So I'm going to let you ponder that until a little bit later on and while we are getting started here. So here we go. Okay, so your class number 3, we are just at about almost halfway before we talk about healing the father and mother image on your self-individuation and self-realization path and healing the inner child. And so on, and then the shadow integration. So this is, as I said, helpful and an important aspect of understanding really these essential aspects of ourselves that we really are working with, and we actually tend to identify with at least one of them, which is Mercury. Okay, so it depends from person to person, and you know, whether we tend to really spend a lot of time in our head and identify with that aspect of our mind that is mercurial. But in my experience, from what I've seen, most people do. We tend to hang out a lot in our lunar consciousness as well, especially as healers and service-oriented professionals. And Mercury is like right up there with the moon. As much as we talk about, and I've got a picture here, right? So, you know, oh, the picture looks like a tiny dot. Obviously, it's not tiny, but I always like to have that little visual here for you, just to show you here what we're talking about, obviously, in terms of you know, its mass and in terms of its size. And then, you know, the importance here in this integration, as much as it may appear to be incomparable in size, but Mercury, once again, is the closest planet to our star, to our solar system star, which is the Sun. So they are very much functioning and in our psyche together, you know, probably the closest to what we would experience or know in our spiritual jargon as the ego mind. Okay, but it is more than that. So I'm going to start us off with a term that I like to use a bit, in particular when we are looking at third house and Mercury from astrology for business perspective, but also from a marketing and communication perspective, and that is coherence or inner coherence. Not exactly the same thing. I oftentimes use it in a communication context, but in my experience, the more inner coherence that we have with these aspects of ourselves that two of which we're gonna talk about, the easier it is to be more coherent from our communication and marketing perspective, okay, to be more effective communicator. And by the way, not just from the verbal and spoken, right, not just from a communication, but also listening, also learning. And also we're going to touch on the importance of unlearning, okay? That is as important. And then in some cases, becomes, I don't want to say it's not more important, but it becomes very important. And then also, you will know when you get to the point where it just feels like you're full, right, in terms of information, and you're potentially, you know, integrating a lot, and you need to obviously sit with that and or digest and so on and so forth. So you want to be following that and knowing that intuitively and really experientially, so that that you can really start relating, right, to these different aspects of you that that you can recognize. I mean, obviously, we don't want to, again, over-identify and just be seeing ourselves as fragmented, because the idea here, especially with coherence, is to recognize, you know, for a moment, we're projecting our attention to that aspect, just as you were, you know, you would be aware of your body, and then you can also recognize, oh, here, you know, here it comes my powerful mind, you know, trying to get my attention, and or, you know, in whatever way you're, as we're going to learn today, you're going to relate to it through say the sign of your Mercury and the house that it is in, and also your third house. So inner coherence, why are we talking about it? Just as we talked about a dissonance and unresolved power battle between your sun, moon, sun and the moon, core needs and wants, we also can experience an inner dilemma, which I've been calling an inner, it's like the leadership, who leads whom. But it's also translated as in terms of coherence, meaning who are you listening? What are you hearing? You know, what are you basing your decisions on? You know, between the mind, right, is typically what we refer to, the mind or the heart. Now we seem to identify a lot of the you know, what we call the, obviously, the feeling world, and then the heart even, with astrologically what we would actually place with the moon. But there is a difference, interestingly enough. So so the moon is more instinctual, and it is very much important to be aware and to nurture that function that we have, so that we can basically become aware of our emotional body and our emotional well-being. Having said that, as much as our heart is connected, or so we believe, right? It is connected with our feeling world. It is, you know, astrologically speaking, it is ruled actually not by the moon, but as it happens, by the sun. So, what, you know, from that perspective, you know, as you know, maybe we want to be with that intuitively, right? Is, you know, both the sun and the moon, and we're going to see today how Mercury plays into that, are important actually for our overall well-being. While we can say that the moon is really represents that connection that we have with our emotional body, but at the same time, the sun is not only that through its rulership with the heart, with our heart, and then also it actually, you know, from in a physiological perspective, it rules more than the heart, also our back, and so on and so forth. So really, the way how I like to think of it is really it's the heart and the backbone, okay? Just as if your mind is trying to place this in some sort of coherent way. And so then what will be the connection between the heart and, you know, we'll really usually refer to as the heart and the back, but it really is the, you know, what we experience as the backbone. So what is the connection between the heart and the backbone, right? If you think about it from a heart, or rather Leo rules the confidence as well, and our creative expression when we are really, where we really need to step into that more of like a regal and confident attitude. And so when we are connected with our heart, okay, and which is the place where we know truth, okay, and where the non-physical really meets the physical, really where we can, right, where we go in to check in with ourselves, and where we when we step into that energy of knowing, really gives us that sense of confidence. Okay, knowing that we are on the right path, and knowing that we are, obviously, if we connect with in particular with the energy of our sun sign. Okay, this is also what is going to give you those those energetic really particles and energies to help you to cultivate your confidence. Okay, because it's going to look like it's going to look different for everybody. And so so what are we talking again? So we're talking here about this dilemma that we are experiencing probably several times throughout the day between the heart and the brain, or what we say, the mind and the heart, or even, which can be translated into these, we realize there's these different patterns, or even different sub-personalities that are running the show, right? And so astrology allows us to really recognize what these particular functions and urges and levels of consciousness may be. Okay, so why we would be really aiming for that higher inner coherence, and you oftentimes hear me refer to that in particular from the perspective of the third house, because that's really where we are, where we can, especially between the sun and the Mercury, when they're really functioning well together, it is typically where we're going to be expressing ourselves. Now, we could be expressing ourselves in any of the other areas as well, especially where you have, in particular, where you have your sun and where you have your Mercury. Now, as we're going to learn today, they're typically not too far from each other, just about one sign away, because even astronomically, right, as we have seen, Mercury is the closest astronomically to the sun. So with the higher inner coherence, so it's now really translated into that that sense of what we call alignment. So it's that sort of sense of alignment, but it's more than that in my experience. When we're talking about the sun and Mercury, there is also that clarity. There is also that sense of vitality. There is that sense of just knowingness that you are, stepping into the best version of yourself, which really is what the sun allows us. Okay, and then Mercury, that we're able to also express ourselves in ways that feel like we are on a message. Okay, and so, but the sun also gives us that confidence, right? Back to the confidence, and then Mercury gives us the words, or really the device that is described by the particular, because it's going to, even that communication device, or what I like to refer to as the radio antenna, right, is going to feel different for different people based on the sign of your Mercury. Now, the third house also plays into that. So when, just to kind of give you a sense, so really when you're embracing that higher inner coherence, and again, this is a process, and we're going to explore that today, and a state of being, and also something to strive for when we know where to look. It gives us, or really when we're embracing the healthy curiosity about life. So healthy as opposed to when we feel like fragmented and, trying to learn 5 things at once, or reading 15 books at once. Not that there is anything wrong with that. Some of us do it more than others, and some of us maybe used to do it more than we're doing it today. But it really is that really combination of knowing that even when we are multitasking and, right, asking questions and learning and so on and so forth, it feels, we just know that it is aligned here, that we sort of, it's being overseen by this consciousness that's behind the mind, behind all of these tools that we use to communicate with each other, if that makes sense, right? So just so you probably have an inkling of what I'm talking about, hopefully here. So it also feels like, what we want to talk about, what we want to teach about, how we communicate, there is a sense of vitality to it. Not that it can dip, it can go up and down, but this is what you want to be looking for, because again, the sun sign and the place where the sun is in your chart is going to give you tools and keys, really, to what your sun needs in terms of energies and so on and so forth, and attitudes and experiences to cultivate that. Inner peace, improved cognitive nervous system function. Mercury is very much connected with functioning of our nervous system. So it plays an important role also in terms of communication, not just like this particular way. There's a communication systems that are ongoing in this very moment as you and I are here, communicating in this particular way, as you know, right? There is the systems that transmit information in your body. There's, for example, hormones and enzymes, and really pretty much all these different teams and different levels of consciousness that are communicating, that just really need to work as a team. So Mercury is very crucial in those. It also is coordinating, right, the brain and then our motor abilities and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff that we tend to take for granted, but Mercury is very, very important part of that. And so we feel more connected, and then also spiritually more interconnected. And I don't mean just connected with the whole of creation. What I mean by being spiritually interconnected is also having that understanding that not just that we're more than our body, but really there are these different levels of consciousness that inhabit us and that we inhabit as well. They're right here. Right? Again, you have the mental, you have emotional, and so on and so forth. There are more than that. Those are the basic ones. So when we have a sense of harmony, when we have a sense of centeredness, when we feel that presentness to our heart and our soul self, what I'm referring to is our unique self, right? That is aligned with our soul. But with the sun, there is a sense of being an individual, okay? And where we feel unified in our overall well-being and wholeness. And compared to feeling chaotic and distracted and fragmented and then drained in our overall focus and well-being. Okay, and I'm not talking about being tired from a busy day and tired from just whatever it is that you are doing that you love to be doing. What I'm talking about is when we feel a little bit more busy with those small tasks and what we call like the low dividend activities and just keeping busy, and it feels like it is not being coherent and aligned, and it's not overseen, like you're not feeling in control of, for example, your day, or you're feeling like you're just trying gazillion little things, and we want to be doing that for some people it's more important than others, and depending, especially when you're building something new, and trying charting a new path and so on and so forth, but that there is you want to have that sort of core sense of knowing, right, which again astrologically will be guided. It needs to be guided by, and you want it to be guided by your solar focus, okay? And then also nurtured by your lunar needs, right? By those core needs. And so today we're going to learn as to how, once again, how Mercury, our mind, representing our mind, and again, these different communication systems, right? In our, not so much in the body, but it does really, again, contribute to this connectedness, okay? Mercury very, very much plays a role in this, the best word that I can access in order to describe that is coherence, but not just the outer coherence, but starting with that inner coherence, where these different aspects of us just feel like, you can feel like there is some sort of symphony going on, okay? And even if when there are times when you don't feel that, then you know how to get back into that, okay? And by the way, what I've got here is not to confuse what I'm talking about, this higher inner coherence, with it's not just inner peace. That's why I've listed here a few things. Inner peace is part of that, but not confusing that with complacency and stagnation and self-satisfaction. right? Compared to like, oh, everything's fine, and just sort of not having, again, because I've started here with saying it's a health, there's a healthy curiosity. So we're still very we're waking up, perked up. This is Mercury, right? We're interested to, there is something we want to learn. But we also want to, if we're spending the whole of our day, right, learning, or, days on end or weeks on end or years on end before we start applying really what we're learning, that's what you want to be watching for, because that Mercury, that mental function, needs to be in service to our solar function. I know a lot of people, astrologers, refer to it as our masculine or ego self. You're not going to hear me refer to it a lot as the ego. If anything, ego mind for both the sun and Mercury. I find in my experience that we're better served when we can at least start integrating a couple of these elements, because the sun is more than our ego, and really our ego is more than comprised more than just the sun. The sun shapes the ego, okay? Just as our backbone, if you like, as our spine, right? Helps us to have a shape to our body as well. And if you like, a shape to our confidence, right? And how we hold ourselves. So when we achieve that higher inner coherence, and you want to be seeing that progress, right, towards what I've described here, there's more. Then we can, again, there is a sense of sort of not just having that sort of synchronization, inner synchronization, and sort of some rhythmical synchronization to that. And this can also work in terms of how you refer to, right, the left brain and the right brain, or heart, checking in with your thoughts and then checking in with the heart, but right. And then obviously really aligning with your soul, right, and really and with your body. So your soul, your intuition is directly also connected to how you experience yourself and your soul and your essence in your body. Okay, but at some point it really becomes this synchronized rhythm that you feel like you're, and sustained, right? So the more sustained that it is, the more you're going to know that you're tapping into that. And just, some people will refer to that being in the zone, and which is typically referred to as, being in that sort of high state of productivity when, the time just flies and you're on a mission. But it's more than that, right? So it's also, there's a sense of presence, and like I've got here, right, being present to your soul, to your heart, and then and also to that healthy curiosity, right, in life. So without referring to it necessarily to the mind, I mean, we want to be paying attention to what the knowing, right, is important. The questions that are coming up, but also the solutions that are coming through as well. And so it's going to contribute to the flow state. It's going to show up as a higher mental stamina. Now that's important. And so if you're feeling like it's not sustained in whatever way you're referring or relating to your Mercury and learning and your mental function, then the chances are that your Mercury is, or if you like, your mind is overworked. You're likely you're pushing it to do the job that it's not designed to do. And that is, it's trying to do the solar function, which needs to be you, and how you're overseeing the managers, right, in your business and in your psyche, okay, in your body. And because you are, right, when you're aware of your solar awareness, when you're aware from and feeling awakened and feeling aware would be the best way to describe it. It would be just when you just feel aware, right? It is just so much easier to from that perspective, and this takes some practice, and this obviously we're already doing this. It's just that in my experience we tend to identify a lot with our Mercury, and so, but there's a difference. Even when the Sun and Mercury are in the same sign, you still want to be really learning to get to connect with your heart, and then also with and when I'm talking about the heart, really what I'm emphasizing is that really heart level confidence, okay, compared to the soul level intuition, right? So really that place, I call it, it's the place of vulnerability, but it's also the place where we are indestructible, okay? So that's how usually we'll hear me refer to it, meaning it's really a place of our power. And it is, from there connected with our solar plexus as well. So, it gives us, so that sense gives us a sustained optimal peak performance. And I'm also here not just talking about inner coherence, we're already talking about that Sun and Mercury working together, and improved quality of life. And yes, again, the moon plays into this very importantly, but it is important that Mercury function is on the same page, because if the Mercury, I call it the runaway Mercury, if Mercury is trying to do something else there, or it's just running so far ahead of the Sun, and it's having its own agenda, or it's just not willing to basically to come into coherence with the solar function, you're going to know, okay, it is going to affect the quality of life, it's going to affect your energy level, as I said, how your mental stamina, and so on and so forth. So what's the solution? As you can already gather, right, the solution is to choose to lead with your Sun, with astrologically speaking, right, with your solar focus. Okay, so we talk about focus with Mercury, but there's a very important focusing function that is solar. Okay, so there's a mental focus, and then there's a solar focus. So the solar focus is connected with our just a sense of self. Okay, there is a sense of clarity of self. Okay, as opposed to feeling like an energy cloud, or right, feeling like just interconnected and not wanting to feel individuated. Okay, there is a sense that we can feel connected even from that place of being, confidently in our heart and operate from our heart awareness. We can still feel connected from that place. In fact, when we really connect in with our solar awareness from that perspective, it's going to be easy to tap into our joy and that heart awareness. So we want to be choosing to lead with your solar focus when deciding on a higher coherence between your Sun or Mercury strategy, which is what we're going to learn today. And in that case, you become aligned with a more sustained, higher reach vision and synchronized, aligned focus, right? So that the focus becomes also aligned with your soul, even though we're typically referring more to the soul when we're talking about the moon, but the Sun is very much connected. It's connected to our essence. It's connected to our creativity, and the Sun and the moon are functioning. They got to be functioning together. By the way, and I've said this before, right? Even without our conscious input, they already are. Just because that's how the universe is structured. Just how this, masculine and the feminine, and everything, a lot of the stuff in the nature, we don't have to oversee. It's already working together. But once again, the more conscious that we can be to the process, more effective it becomes in our life. And so, right, so versus getting caught up in our daily operational stuff and low dividend activities, and although Mercury represents a necessary learning. So there is a necessary learning that we have to embrace there, and gives us function of connecting in many different ways, right, including social media, and also ability to gather evidence, to gather facts, to gather information, and so on and so forth. So the Sun-Mercury integration work is essential whether there is a conjunction aspect or not. Okay, so really there is only a conjunction that we can have between Sun and the Mercury. You're going to find, if you want to look at different charts, the Mercury is always going to be very close to the Sun, just because astronomically that is the case. So you can think of the Sun, as I said, as the inner unifying, so it's the inner unifying force that shapes a healthy backbone of our ego. So really, just as the Sun is the center of our solar system, so is our solar function, is basically, that we call ego. We call it ego, but it once again, I like to remind us that it's really what shapes the ego. So it's still the illuminating awareness, okay, our light, if you like, that is behind the ego, that shapes the ego, is an important part of that function, but it's a part of it. So there is more of this sort of really a unifying force, just as the Sun really is the center. This is a magnificent gravity, obviously, to it, and so really is, it draws all of these, different planets that are moving at a certain speed and in a certain orbits. So in the same way, right, is how it is important that we are also functioning, that we are connecting with this unifying force within ourselves. And then, by the way, so again, just want to make this clear, it's the soul and the self is how I refer to it, okay? Because it's the Sun has an important function also to helps us to lead us to the individuation journey, okay? And we're having that healthy backbone is important. So a Mercury represents our perception mechanism for perceiving and thinking, okay? So thinking information or thinking about stuff, right? Through a filter of the ego mind, which the chances are you're aware, right? We all have a filter, one way or the other. It's a mental model of reality, a particular perceptual story, if you'd like, and then as a result of that, meaning if we've perceived a certain relationship between certain energies in the past, say between our parents, right, or between whatever that may be, right, in terms of money, in terms of relationships between people of the same gender or the opposite gender or siblings and so on and so forth, that creates a certain perceptual story that we expect potentially to be repeated, right? And because that's what we have known. So then it creates an inner decision-making process that's based on this past learning that we observed. And then as a result of that, our mental model, okay, is now becomes structured, and I call that creates our funnel of consciousness, if you want to think of it that way, right? So you've heard of the term people that are open-minded and or closed-minded, right? So it's just based on certain perceptual story or past experiences that people on some level choose that, and on some level it's part of their basically, how they're structured and how they learn and connect, so that they will, contract when, for example, some people, when at any mention of school or learning, they will change the conversation and so on and so forth. Why? Well, based on the different experiences that they have had through learning, right? For other people, it will be about money. For some people, it will be about relationships. For other people, it will be about children and so on and so forth, right? So that's what we're talking about here. And then as a result of that, right, we, as you can imagine, right, we funnel experiences based on how we funnel information into our reality, is also then drives how we feel and also how we experience reality. Because if I see and perceive this, then it must, right, if there is a certain expectation that based on experiencing, just as in the morning when the sun is up, we already expect based on our previous experiences that when the sun is up, we're going to feel more energized, right? Then it must mean that the new day is here, right? So with the Sun and the Mercury, they are connected. They already are connected and working together. And importantly here to realize is they are connected in how we give meaning to things. Okay, so Mercury is important in that function, in how, again, what we in our decision making function, in our executive function. Okay, the Sun plays into that. Again, they're very much working together. Just the Mercury is more information, what we call the typical information oriented, and but also transmission oriented. And then the Sun is really more awareness oriented, and if you like, vitality, more really in terms of very much really giving us a sense of who we truly are. Okay, who we truly are, because we're not our Mercury, even though, again, we can identify a lot with our mind. We're not our mind. So this is very, very important to begin understanding. So they're connected together and working together in how we give meaning to things. In particular, Mercury then completes that and packages that, okay? Based then on what we say, on how we language things, and the questions we ask or questions we don't ask, and so on and so forth. Who do we choose to work with, and how, who do we choose to connect with or not connect with, including our emotional states, including our intuitive perception, including our soul, body, memory. So they are working together, as you can imagine, right? So they're working together in connection with the moon. And then the moon is in turn connected also with how we perceive, think, feel, and perform day to day. So Mercury is more connected with that day-to-day performance. Moon is not so much concerned with the performance. It's more about our emotional, right, well-being, and the instinctual responses as well, and so on and so forth. So when there is a Sun-Mercury natal aspect, which once again can be only conjunction, and because they're never more than 28 degrees apart, which is like one full sign, then the urgency to integrate the two dimensions is even greater. So it really becomes more essential. So with a conjunction, which would be within 8.5 degrees or so, so if you have that, or somebody that you will, especially when that Sun, or rather is close to Mercury, or Mercury is very close to the Sun, within those 8.5 degrees, you will likely see how, for those people, that a mercurial function is very active, and it shows up in many different ways. But it will just feel like there are different expressions for it in the traditional astrology, which I don't necessarily subscribe to, but it will feel like the Mercury will feel like any planet, by the way, that's close to the Sun, under greater developmental pressure. So this is important to understand, and it has different purposes to it. Now, especially if there's a so-called Kazemi, or Sun and Mercury are only, like, they're so close, they're literally within the same degree, but especially within 17 minutes. This is rare, but usually it's, for those people that experience it and that have it in their chart, it is important. Then the mind even needs more heightened perception, even the synchronization, what are we talking about, and purification, okay, as you can imagine. And then we, meaning like our ideas and, how present we are to, once again, our own self-awareness compared to basically how we identify with our mind. Now, it's a little bit different when that Sun and Mercury are very close, because for those people, it is actually, they are meant to create even more of that synchronization or coherence. But even in between the two, but even then, important to recognize the difference between the mercurial level of consciousness and the solar level of consciousness, okay? So while we love to complain about our sun-related lacks, we're often creating a lifestyle and a daily routine that fits our mercurial mind. Okay, so this is a biggie, more than our sun's vitality needs. This is pretty much one of the core ideas here that I wanted you to keep in mind, and as to why it is important that we are really creating experiences that are fitting our sun sign and the place that the sun is in our design. So again, while we love to complain about our sun sign lacks, and yes, you know, we would say that we describe ourselves based on where our sun sign is, but you're going to find Sun in Aries people complaining about needing to build their confidence, as you're going to find a lot of Taurus people still working on optimizing their money story and or investments or that inner peace. Gemini, while the cookbook astrology and textbooks will describe them as great communicators, in my experience, they're working on that. And that's not just about the gift of gab, it's also about the gift of listening and engagement and so on and so forth. So listening is important, and developing that active listening and so on and so forth. Even deeper listening with Sun in Cancer, where, you know, we're going to find a lot of people Sun in Cancer complaining about either not, and Sun in Leo even, you know, not enough love or not enough care, people don't care, right? Or, and so on and so forth. So you're going to find a lot of those lacks that people will, and they don't, you know, they're necessarily, you know, it's not like that's what we need to identify with. That's not really what the function of the sun sign is, to actually give us important keys as to where we need to be making effort to create those experiences, right? We've talked about this before, compared to being more receptive and in receiving mode, where we have that our moon and Venus, by the way. So the distinction here is just important that you're creating the lifestyle that's fitting your inner queen or king, right? And not Mercury, because then you're likely going to be, it's like, you know, changing furniture and drapes like every, year or something like that, if you are building life based on what your Mercury needs. So the sun, it represents our central will to live and lead. So both of those functions are important. It has that more visionary function, right? It sees more, really what we need and what we, and towards what we want, and represents the life itself, if you like, versus tasks in life. Okay, so there is a difference between the life and also tasks in life. And then Mercury, on the other hand, is the central processing function that needs to inform the sun, basically your solar path. Okay, it's the spokesperson I've got here, or the technician. So most people get stuck in this reality, just as, you know, we get stuck in our head. You know, this is especially if you have predominance of planets in air, but also if you have a lot of planets in the third house, or even your sun, or even a south node in air, moon in one of the air signs, and the chances are you're likely already getting an idea, right? You will know when Mercury is running the show, while resisting to stuck more fully on your individuation journey and into leadership of your sun. Generally, most people really need to, it's not a big mystery. Most people, even the ones that are already in a place of a leadership and, you know, that already have been fairly focused in their life, everybody will get, anytime we get to that sort of reaching certain plateau in our life and we become a little complacent and we are not connecting even with our Mercury, by the way, right, and not learning and so on and so forth, we could be reaching that point where we are, you know, not fulfilling our potential. So while your mind functions in alignment with your natal Mercury, your overall life strategy and your growth needs need to align with your solar consciousness. And this is including when they're in the same sign, because it's not just about the sign. The sign is part of that, right? The archetype that gives you the how. But it's also the keeping in mind that the sun is a different level of consciousness, right? It's much bigger and it's more energizing and it's more vital, okay? And it gives, again, that gives you that sense of aliveness and vibrancy and radiance. When you are embodying your sun and when you are in that level of where you are willing to claim more space and to radiate your self, basically your essence into the world, and you're willing to be in your heart presence, okay? Now it's going to depend again, sun again, if sun in Pisces or sun in the 8th or the 4th is going to function differently a little bit then, but it's always the sun. So, and then the shadow will be for Mercury, will, what I refer to as the runaway Mercury, when it just feels more disconnected, more incoherent, and we feel like we are over-identifying with that aspect of us that may be more fragmented in focus. Okay? So the Sun, Mercury focus and coherence, it would appear, we would expect, right, to see that we could achieve that with more ease when the Sun and Mercury are in the same sign compared to being in dissimilar signs. So for example, would be in different signs when you have, let's Sun in Aries and Mercury in Taurus, Sun in Taurus, Mercury in Aries or Gemini, right? So people that were born with Sun in Taurus, they can only have that Mercury in Taurus, Aries, or Gemini. So you want to start noticing those differences as well. You may find that, we've thought that we were recognizing people based on their sun sign, but it's quite possible actually that a lot of what we see and know, or even what we know about people, is based on their Mercury. Again, in a lot of cases it will be the same, but in many other it will not be the same as the sun sign. So, however, when they're in the same sign, it can be more difficult also to gain perspective and recognize a blind spot in terms of, are we identifying more with the mind or with the heart, okay? Especially, and the ego. Especially when the Sun and Mercury are fused and close together within 8.5 degrees, in which case, then what you want to be looking for is seeing if there is an opposition that needs to bring some sort of valuable perspective in our awareness. Okay, so it is essential to be aligning with our life's overall strategy and synchronized a long-term focus daily to make sure that it aligns with our solar path. Now, this is especially so once you have processed the information needed for the next step. So once you've read that book, read that article, right? Again, there are going to be times when we're going to, even right now, you're likely using more of your mental function, right? To listen to this information, to read the slides and so on and so forth. But even then, so the sun even needs to inform the intentions you may have, right? So based on your sun sign, this can also drive in terms of what you're learning and so on and so forth from an overall perspective. But Mercury is going to give you even more specific information in terms of what skills you are here to learn, and then also what your learning style is. So the sun provides the first illumination keys to the awareness behind the ego. Now, we refer to it as the ego, and I know a lot of astrology books and astrology refer to it as the ego. Sometimes I will say the ego, but it really is the awareness behind it. And for a lot of people, that, that's still for us, it's a bit of a journey to experience that and to understand that, which is why, it seems to be fused in how we talk about it. And but it's so important to start distinguishing that you have the awareness that's behind the ego, but also that, again, egoic function that is connected with our individuality is under the umbrella of the sun, okay? And so while Mercury is busy enough learning, perceiving, gathering facts, serving the sun, that it can get caught up in the small thinking, even when it's in a water sign. And although it's, it's going to be more attuned to a bigger picture, let's say in a water sign or in a fire sign as well. And then it's going to be more grounded and pragmatic and methodical when it's in a earth sign. Okay. So those were a little more detailed slides, and now we're going to recap on, and I've shared this in several courses before. So when we've talked about Mercury, and so when we're very really directly speaking about our thoughts, how we speak, how we write, Mercury is, going to be directly involved in that process of translation, of interpretation, of transmission, of learning, of perception. That's basically its primary function, is to, it's like when you see those big, perked up eyes. Well, first the sun is that sort of sense of awakening and a sense of, oh, this is me, right? And then Mercury is like, oh, look at that, right? When we start noticing things, when we start picking up cues and clues and reading, by the way, both verbal and nonverbal. And of course, it's going to be easier to pick up the nonverbal with certain type of Mercuries, right? And you can probably already guess which one. So how we learn, perceive, process, and share information, and directs the houses with Gemini and Virgo on the cusp. So Mercury in fire strives on inspiration and spontaneity. Mercury in earth prefers hands-on practical learning. And Mercury in air loves sharing abstract ideas and concepts and also learning in that particular way. And Mercury in water learns visually and intuitively. Now, there will be also variations to this. If you, for example, you can have Mercury in air. Like, for example, I have Mercury in Gemini, but it's also in an exact aspect with Pluto, okay, which is a ruler of a water sign, and then also aspect with Neptune, which is another water. So basically, it gives more of that intuitive and visual and a deep feeling experience to learning, okay? But fundamentally, you want to start first from understanding its sign. And then if you feel like, oh, but I feel like there are other elements, the chances are it's the house that the Mercury is in. And if there are any aspects with planets that are maybe less, well, obviously would not be as mercurial, they're functioning differently, that play into that as well. Now, today, I'm going to remind as well the importance of analyzing our Mercury in conjunction with our third house, okay, which represents your basic inherited mindset, your story, including your evolving story, okay? So really, that third house is, right, if we're showing up in the first and we are now in the second, right, we're developing some core gifts and we are adding value, okay, or becoming aware of how we can add value. In the third house, now we're ready to talk about it, okay, and to also learn more where we feel like we need to learn new skills and so on and so forth. So it is very expression oriented, right? And so it is our, soul language that's expressed through the third house, meaning really the vibration of our soul translated into a coherent language, okay? I will often say we need to speak human in the third, but it really, it's all forms of communication, but especially obviously in this particular way, it will be a coherent and human communication and language that you want to optimize for your own purposes and intentions. Meaning, obviously, if you're a teacher and a leader, which the chances are if you're listening to this, then it is going to be, this type of communication and being, willing to share your big message and also to, market your services and so on and so forth. That is going to be important. And also to communicate that specific frequency that is an expression of your soul. So there is, now we're communicating that in other areas, including from the ascendant, okay? But in the third house, it really, in my experience, really needs to be coherent. And oftentimes we are, and it really adds, basically, it's really going to add to your effectiveness in your communication from a marketing and promotion perspective, and also from just simply being a well understood and reaching those that, it's like delivering the message. The message has been delivered, and also it's going to give you a sense of being on message. Okay, so so in the third house, you really need to articulate and continually be improving and working on that. And this is really one of the primary functions of the third house, is dialogue, right, and communication, and so on and so forth. This is why it also represents siblings, because from an early age, and cousins and relatives, because we spend a lot of time. And then school, right, school environment, early school environment, because we tend to learn a lot, right, a language and so on and so forth. That behavior, obviously a lot of the programming, right, and so on and so forth. So the stuff that we also, mimic our parents, and that we learn from our teachers, and so on and so forth. So what is my story and what is my message to the world? There's an essential here, vibration and frequency and strategy, that the third house can help you with, okay? We're going to see this through many examples. So your blog, book, video, audio, website, newsletter, any, of these key forms of education, and also communication, also exams, tests, courses, classes, learning, your marketing, your speaking, teaching, writing, media. Now there are other areas in our chart that are also connected with both media and also teaching, and then also marketing in today's day and age. Just because, for example, in let's see if I use an example of Facebook, I place Facebook, that level of connection now starts in the third. Obviously 20 years ago, social media did not exist, but it's social media. So media is third, just as your website is, and so on and so forth. But social is, yeah, you guessed it, right? The seventh as well. So the seventh is also, because it's in the third is, you've heard of that, know, like, and trust factor. So the third is where you get people to know you. You can think of it that way. The seventh is where you get people to like you. And then trust is there, the intersection between the 7th and the 10th, and also rather 7th and the 8th, and then the 10th and the 11th. Okay, although we don't talk about trust necessarily, we refer to it more as, or I refer to it as delivering on your promise. So it's more to do with the delivery and then stepping into your expertise, and then reaching wider audience, right? Especially in the 11th. So, but it all starts from a communication perspective, starts in the first, but that's more of the attitude, right? And how you show up. The second is like, okay, what do you have for me, right? And then the third, okay, tell me about it. Okay. So the themes you're here to master, advance, and teach. And then I've got here, facts or fake news. I know that's a fairly new term, but that's basically where rumors, gossip, and so on and so forth. There are actually forms of astrology where we use that more. For let's say in horary astrology, when I actually haven't necessarily, but there are examples in textbooks in terms of when people are looking to verify certain information, but based on whether something is true or whether it's a rumor, where you can ask that in an astrological chart, or based on the timing of the question to get an answer. Once again. So, but there's a lot of that you can also answer in your natal. But I mentioned before that in the ancient times, basically, most of the astrology was based on just the timing of where the planets are right now as we speak. So, okay. So the really in the third house, we need to be most coherent here and clear. We need to be, we're aiming to be well understood, whether it's to be logical, which we would typically expect. But for some people, if you've got Cancer energy there, then for you, it actually is about, or even Pisces, to be empathic. Okay, so it's not going to be about logic necessarily for everybody. Here is where we're expressing the core frequencies of your synchronized sun, moon, rising, really synchronized, as in there will be some sort of alchemy of these three core, pretty much the whole chart, but these three, if you would, to synchronize them together. This is what we really want to be pulling in and having some, through doing that sun moon integration, and then today's sun Mercury as well, and then understanding your rising sign, right? Where we want to be expressing that here through the third. Now, if you have planets in the third, that is also going to play into that. So it really helps you to stay on a message and on point, and to grow your credibility towards greater relatability, expertise, and authority. As I said, it enhances that know, like, trust factor and believability. So if you're struggling with feeling like you're not getting your message across, or people are not catching on, or what you're sharing, or read any of those sort of things, then the chances are you need to spend some more time on understanding how you can align here in your house of communication and highest, what I like to refer to as the highest coherence. So the key to your personal harmonic that feels like when you know you're speaking your truth, every time or as often, and I don't mean like speaking, but really speaking your truth in terms of what it is that you want to be sharing. Because again, it's going to look differently for everybody. For somebody who has Scorpio on the third, it's going to look different to somebody who has Aries on the third, where they need to speak more directly. Okay. Okay, so now if at this point you're like, oh, but I'm just, what is the difference between Mercury and third house? To try and, to really understand the difference between the two, you can think of Mercury as that sort of transmission box, right? Like if your mind was a radio and you had a message and you had a certain device, right, in terms of how you, again, perceive, how you process information, how you learn, and then also how you transmit, that would be primarily based on Mercury, okay, as the core device, as your core style of perception, outside of necessarily themes and mental models and things like that. So it's more just that function. Okay, if you like a function, we all have that function of communication and learning and transmission. So knowing the sign and the house your Mercury is, and helps me to understand you and how you function, how you process information, how you make decisions in order to act, whether you'll say, oh, I need to meditate on it a little bit longer, right? Mercury in Pisces, or even Mercury aspect with Neptune, or Mercury in the 12th. And in fact, what actually would be aligned for you, even if you have Mercury that it's in a more quick decision-making sign. So, so it represents the mind as the tool, as an instrument, just like a computer, an operating system, like Mac, Windows, RAM, right? Like the radio antenna, for example, and that representing that cognitive function that we have, and that we know that we need to keep active, and that we want to be continually learning to avoid, for example, a mental decline. Now, on the other hand, the third house is the key modifying principle. Okay. So the third house is the key modifying principle that can best help us to make ourselves clear in human language. Okay, so I like to be cheeky about that, especially for healers. We like to communicate a lot in different vibrationally and telepathically and so on and so forth. And actually that we're going to see that in the third house as well. But I primarily also want to remind you of the importance of that we communicate, right, what we've got to offer and who and how we want people to know about us. It is important to optimize that area of our design. Okay, so it really modifies our Mercury transmission channel for better functionality, you could say, and better understandability. Okay, and then it helps me to know what you need in order to heal your mindset and your story, but also the frequency, the energy will help you to be better understood. And of course, we can have a more effective expression. We can have a shadowy expression of that. Okay, so if that radio antenna or that radio or that computer, right, was represented by Mercury, okay, then the particular radio channel, right, if Mercury is the radio, then the radio channel that you are transmitting on or you're tuning in would be represented by that, like roughly speaking, okay, just to sort of simplify this for you, very roughly speaking, would be represented by the third house energy and the cusp, and then also will be modified if there are any planets there, and then the energy of the ruler by sign and house. But you can think of it fundamentally based on the cusp energy, okay? Then any themes, the how, you know, your key platform and how you build that platform and so on and so forth. A lot of keys that are going to be found in the third house. And of course, can be determined only based on accurate birth time. So a recap here, what are we encountering in the third house, right? So your most coherent self. But of course, it's going to have different tones and accents and different, right, energies and different, even you're going to have different stories that are present, not just one, in that part or really field of experience. But also your inner critic, your teacher self, your teacher is also going to show up here, and your mindful self, but also your disruptive self, right? It's really all going to depend on the energies that you have here. And the spoken word, the written word, as I said, your learning abilities, your busy self, you know, your high school bully would show up there, and or your car is also what we place in the third, okay, and a number of other things. Now, what are we transforming in the third is we're shifting that I am and I have focus, which is, you know, in the first, and the second to now I am heard, right? I'm communicating, but not just I am communicating, even though that can be a huge aha here to find that voice and to find that expression. But right, most optimally here, you want to feel like you're heard and that you're, you know, on point, or that at least you're exploring and you're in that curiosity, right, to be finding that message and seeing progress with that. Okay, so our inherent early mindset that needs to evolve to support the new future version of ourselves that has already created the dream life that we desire. Okay, so so basically meaning that early mindset is going to evolve. So we're going to see actually both the early mindset there and then also the ideal mindset. Yes, both how by the lower expression, if you like, and then a high expression or more effective expression of that similar archetype there. Also outdated mental models and mind constructs that need to be dismantled and upgraded in order to live, learn, and connect from a more balanced to well-integrated and the highest expression of third and the ninth house polarity. Okay, but we need to get clear on the third before we then look to harmonize that polarity and integrate. So you want to seek to align with a more effective expression of the third house sign. Okay, and I've got here an example of that effective Scorpio. And then dismantling outdated Scorpio. So you want to be similar how we talked about that ascendant and the descendant here. You want to be finding how you are learning how to express your sign in the third house more effectively, and also how you are unlearning any outdated mental models and coping mechanisms and so on and so forth that no longer serve you here in more shadowy expression of that third. What I most need to learn is also going to be shown here, okay? And more urgently even than in the ninth. Now the ninth, if you do have more planets there, or even the south node or the sun, it also becomes important from a learning perspective. And the sixth also is connected with learning, but it's more of hands-on and more like skill building. Here it is more, it can be also skill building as well in the third, but it is, again, a lot more communication oriented. And the sixth is more consistency now and application oriented. And the third can feel like it has that in a higher expression of that when we reach that higher level of coherency there, it is going to feel like it's we're really implementing more in the third, okay, as well. So it's not just learning, there is implementability factor that's important there as well, or that direct knowledge, okay, and then direct application of what we're learning. It's like that Gemini, right? That dual Gemini, which is, you know, really, it's like hearing with one ear and then applying already with another. But it really, in its optimal expression, it's also being actively listening and being, you know, being coachable, being open to learn and pay attention to what we need to be knowing, right? Rather than already deciding what we're going to say, right? Before we've actually heard what is what is being asked of us. So what we most need to learn and be knowledgeable and proficient in. So this is, you know, when people say, oh, that expression, we are basically meant to teach what we most need to learn. So that, to a degree, I would agree from this third house perspective. So the third house is where that applies. Not necessarily not in other areas, but in the third house, and there is an important, once again, very important part of learning here, that we are meant to, one way or the other, to either teach and or transmit and or share or talk about in some way, if, you know, depending on our path, whether some people will identify with teaching and some people will identify more with being in a conversation, right? Or raising awareness, for example, and things like that. So this is where that would apply. And again, what we do need to talk about more to develop and share ideas. And there will be an innate desire to do that, but we can also have a resistance to doing this here, because it does require more of that coherence that I talked about, right? Willingness to first be aware of ourselves, you know, having self-awareness. Obviously, then it can bring up whole bunch of stories and stuff. If you're doing stuff publicly, right, in social media, it's going to bring up anxieties and all of that third house stuff as well. But for some people, you know, they can stay on that first house awareness as well, which is more about sharing pictures and look at me and look what I'm up to, right? The third house is the important element here to actually tell people what you're up to and or what you've got to really, what are they tuning into your channel for, right? Knowing what is it that people will want to hear from you. That is what the third house will remind you. So interestingly enough, also what I find here is going to give us information about the decision-making process behind what courses we are continually signing up for, or might be wishing to sign up for, or avoid signing up for. Okay, so meaning what is it that we know and that we need to even be more proficient at, okay, knowing. So how to market and promote, we learn and master that in the third. Important to understand, we talk more about this in Astrology for Business, to know who we're relating to in the seventh, and so on and so forth. But also where we can get stuck in asking, but how do I? And once again, keep taking that course after course as if we don't already know. But the third house actually reminds us that we do know. We do know that particular, whatever it is that's indicated here. And as you know, we can really rely on that knowing that we have in the second, right? The second is really where a lot of our gifts, core gifts, rest. In the third, it may not be fully integrated yet, but it truly is. When people say, you know, we're here to, it's whatever is connected with the third house is what we're gonna have to be talking about and learning. And just by the nature of spending a lot of time with this, we are going to master it. And then we become, one way or the other, a teacher of that. Now we can apply that to the first to a degree as well. And then very much the second, okay? It's almost like we're ready-made teacher for that second house gifts. The third, we are in training, okay? And very likely to master soon. So I hope that makes sense. So there is, if we contrast it with the ninth house, that this is, you know, compared to this more, you know, familiar awareness compared to, you know, what, again, the stuff that we tend to talk about on a daily basis compared to that actually where we need to stretch ourselves and stretch our perspective and grow beyond the horizon of familiarity. Now, we explored this more in astrology for business, but it is important concept to bring forward here if you are to really work with this integration and for a particular helpful reason, and that is to be well on your way to achieve that higher coherence here. And you know, from a business perspective, would be, you know, more effective communication and be a more effective communicator, and then also you know, to achieve what I like to call that harmonic resonance in your messaging and your really between your brand and your basically how you show up in the world, okay, between your signature style and your third house expression, or your story and your, so I call this between the first and the third house working together, okay, as your messaging harmonic. And there is a vibrational component, there is an energetic component to this, and there is the, what we're talking about here, and that is sort of breaking it down so that it actually makes some sense. What I mean by vibrational is that some of us have a gift in actually tuning into and hearing when people are speaking, and or even how they're showing up, to actually see even without knowing their chart, but especially when you know the astrology of it. Like, for example, when I hear a lot of my clients, or pretty much all of my clients, when they speak, even when I don't see them on a video, if I see them on the video, it's even easier. But even if when we're speaking on the phone, right, you will hear me oftentimes, I will have input in terms of how you're speaking, and you know, also the what's coming through in terms of, or even more specific feedback in terms of your marketing, okay? Because I have this ear for discovering and really hearing any type of sort of disharmonies that are, or any congruencies that that show up in terms of how you're, you know, in particular, when I also look at your chart, in terms of how you're meant to be, really what is most aligned for you to show up, and then also how to express yourself in a more effective way, especially towards your more full expression. It just generally feels better. It feels better in our body, it feels better in our soul, it feels better in our everywhere, okay, when we are more fully expressed. And this is where that third house, and then, but again, not operating on its own. We talked about the third and the Mercury. We want to understand them, right, as that radio box, and then the radio channel. And now, right, to basically create that synchronization or alignment, you want to be realizing whether you are spending a lot of time in your first house. You know, unless you have planets there, several planets there, it is important, but generally speaking, you still want to be very much important to harmonize that first and the third, to really be well heard, and then also to build what I like to refer to as your message credibility, or what some people call the know, like, trust factor. Okay. So, so the ruler of the first will also give you more information in terms of how you can express yourself more fully in terms of your style. And then the ruler of the third, how to fully express your coherence in communication so that you can be better understood. And it just feels like it works. Okay. And so, ta-da, in a recap here, if we were to place this in a sort of more simplified template, it combining in particular the third house, it would be referring to your teacher, author, speaker archetype, okay, and basically using a third house sign here, expression, because it's really meant to be your guide on your journey of whatever it is that you're creating or teaching or speaking about. And then in the role, service of, here you want to have a keyword that's connected with the sign of your planetary third house planetary ruler. So for example, if you have Scorpio on the third house, then both Scorpio and then you have, for example, Mars as the ruler of Scorpio in Cancer, then both Scorpio and Cancer need to play into that, okay? And then in the field context of, which will be a keyword for the third house ruler position by house. Now this will be important for you if you are a marketer, if you're a teacher, author, speaker, and depending on where you are with your astrology understanding as well. But again, start first with the cusp of the third. Now you have seen already these slides that I created for you, distilled interpretation tools for understanding your third house, interpreting your third house sign, right? That can help you to best articulate, make yourself clear in alignment with that principle. And this is something you want to be continually looking for more effective ways of expressing. It's really going to help you and you want to be, this is a continuous process of discovery. And then also growing in coherence, credibility, and trust when you're sharing, speaking here. Just a slightly different slide, but it's a similar idea. And then here you want to be in coherence with this is your inner teacher of, so for example, again, let's say with Scorpio on the third, teacher of esoteric truth. So this is your inner teacher and also who you are becoming, okay? Now you can apply the same slide also to what you've got, the cusp and the energy that you have in the sign that you have on the second, okay? Even to a degree on the first. It's just a different application. So in the second, as I said, was really what we can rely on, okay? The third is what we need to be more learning and dialoguing and talking about, and then we are well on our way to master, okay? Just because by the virtue of communication, okay? This particular slide is to help you to distinguish here the difference between having the same sign on the first house compared to the third and the 10th, okay? So what I call the difference between being that energy, speaking that energy, and then delivering. So in the third, marketing is still you're talking about, but in the 10th, we really need to deliver on that so it has more weight, even more, right, of our integrity and of our really delivery, really when you're delivering a service, right, is very, very much, right, and how we build a business and how we develop business is very, very much connected with the 10th house energy. And the third is, we can stay stuck in the third. A lot of people are, this can happen to the best of us, right? We can, in this day and age of social media, believe that a lot of stuff that we need to be doing is marketing. And then we're doing all of the third house and not showing up enough here where we need to also deliver on in the 10th. and or we can also be showing up a lot in the third, and avoiding for example, calls for action and sales in the second. Okay, but here primarily I want you just to see the difference between, for example, say having Scorpio rising and then third house Scorpio and then the 10th house, right? So with the first house Scorpio, really is establishing the trust factor, like right off the bat. Okay, especially in your personalized posts. This means actually to everybody, in all of our relationships, is what is expected with our first house. In the third, we really want to establish it even more through our writing, and really where we need to be understood. And then in the 10th, now we got to be delivering on this taboo breaking really strategy with a wider audience on now even public pages. Now Scorpio is actually a little bit trickier because there's a lot of projection that we tend to draw in or attract from the external world. But let's say Sagittarius, if we look at a Sagittarius rising, right, we're seeking to infuse our presence with high vibe energy, meaning positive expectation, and really being vibrant in how we show up is even most important for a Sagittarius rising. And then compare it to, let's say, third house, and meaning, like, again, the first thing that people see, right, including your environment and even whatever it is, right, that first image. And then the third house is now demonstrating where we got to be. So it's more with the Sag rising, we're basically showing up in this particular way. And in the third house, either Jupiter or Sagittarius, we're demonstrating that faith and enthusiasm in what we are talking about. You know how sometimes you will hear people talk a lot about stuff and you're like, oh, I don't know whether they're really embodying, if they really believe in what they're saying. So that usually means that they are very caught up in their third house, and it's possible that we're also not embodying necessarily what it is that we're talking about. So that's the third house issue, if you like. We definitely have to be embodying our rising sign if you want to bring in, and if you embody your third house frequency, it will help you to really optimize and really become more intimate with that energy and actually bring it into your fuller expression. But in my experience, may not even be necessary for everybody. It's going to depend on also the element that you have that third house in, whether it's more air, whether it's more connected to whether it's fire element or earth. So you want to keep that in mind as well. And then, so hopefully these, I call them social engagement keys, just to help you. This is more from astrology for business perspective, but just to help you to see how we contrast the same sign, and so you can sort of start seeing that difference in the contrast between, hopefully an aha here in how to operate with these archetypes in different parts of your design. Okay. So Mercury transmission keys here that I've put in this particular slide is to remind us here, first of all, of the rulership of Mercury with and affinity with the Gemini and Virgo, which also, whether every Mercury, basically the function of Mercury is very much connected to that really strategy of Gemini. So it means that every Mercury is going to have that figure-outable desire and also these ideas that we want to share with others. But it's going to depend on where we have that Mercury by sign. Okay, so this is just to remind us that basically this is where that's coming from. And then there is also this doable and practical element to it that comes from its affinity with Virgo. But once again, if you have Mercury in more air, right, in an air sign, then it's going to be more conceptually oriented compared to, say, Mercury in Capricorn, and so on and so forth. These are some of the vibrational tones and sounds that are connected with Mercury. And then also keep in mind that when you have Mercury in the 4th, 8th, or the 12th, it is not going to function necessarily as we would expect a typical Mercury. And even if you have Mercury in those houses or even in those signs, what I also encourage you is to really potentially rediscover your Mercury, because if you have taken on any programming that your Mercury in Cancer or Mercury in the 12th house has to function like a left brain or logical Mercury, it could have created potentially a challenge for you. Or even Mercury in Sagittarius, looking to function as a Mercury in Gemini is just not the same. It's like apples and oranges, right? So Mercury in fire is meant to be more, allowed, if you like, and even more curious and less patient. And it needs to, be on the move, and, it needs to, be willing to learn, to experiment and explore the unfamiliar. And especially with Sagittarius, but also Aries and somewhat Mercury in Leo. Okay. So more with Earth and 2nd, 6th, and the 10th house Mercury. It is more basically how our communication device, right, is designed to work, is to really hold more of what I like to refer to as the lower pitch sounds, and even more still and quieter. And this can also show up also with Mercury in more intuitive signs and houses, but especially more embodied sound. It is important with Mercury in 2nd, 6th, and the 10th, and or Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. Okay. So here's a slide that you can work with to discover your own key transmission of your Mercury that combines Mercury and the 3rd house. So this is both the message and also the transmission method that's most aligned for you. Okay. So the 3rd house, my message story, aligns with right, the principle that's connected with the 3rd house. The principle that helps to be more clear, more coherent, more articulate, more credible. And then I speak, learn, teach, make decisions, right, and transmit, broadcast info in a way that right, is aligned with your natal Mercury. So these two elements are important these are 3 reasons as to what this can help you, and that is to help you to really understand how you know truth. Obviously, you may already know this, but hopefully this serves as a confirmation. Also, what do you need most to learn and hear? And then also, what are you here to say and share with others and the world? So both Mercury and then in particular 3rd house as the modifier. And then when we talk today about how we can begin integrating the Sun and Mercury in their integrated expression, okay, here are some questions and some prompts for you to do that. So, for example, this was already the number 1 here. Question is already what we've explored with the Sun. So you wanna, the reason I'm repeating it here, because I want you to keep that in mind as one of your primary, like that solar focus, right? I'm increasing my vitality and energy daily, because if you're not focusing in on increasing your vitality and energy daily by creating experiences that are aligned with your Sun, it is going to be more difficult for your mercurial function and your 3rd house to operate at its optimal. Okay, so what do I want to experience more of that would bring a sense of inner coherence and peace? So I'm excited to experience more. This would be connected with your Sun sign, while continually learning that is connected with your Mercury and And also you can add here third house if you'd like, okay? And then I'm going to become I didn't add that here, but hopefully by now you already are getting suns very much connected with your sun sign so that I can create more, right? This is your sun sign, solar focus, while unlearning what it is that you need to unlearn in the process. I'm going to have slides to help you with that. Now, the key here in the integration and your understanding of how Sun and Mercury need to work together is that the Mercury needs to be in service of your solar function. Okay, and whether you want to refer to it as the ego-mind teamwork and some ultimate synchronization of the heart and mind, that's up to you. But the key point is that I want you to get out of this is to really see that the speed at which you operate on your mercurial and mental level really needs to be in service to, if you like, the speed and the direction and the focus of your, and the priorities of your solar awareness, your solar function, okay? So here are the slides with your Mercury through signs and your Mercury transmission as well, how one best transmits information and how one best receives and processes. So there's lots of fun here to be had. Some of you have already seen the slides, and I still encourage you to work with this now from the Sun-Mercury integration perspective, okay, and to really see, again, even if the Sun and the Mercury you have are, or chart you're looking at, are in the same sign, still very important to work with these particular prompts and questions so you can start distinguishing and the difference between when you're in your solar focus and you know, willing to individuate and differentiate yourself, for example, and your ideas compared to with Mercury, which is more about, you know, let's talk about it, right? Let's talk it over. You know, unless you have Sun in Gemini, let's talk it over and let's, you know, talk about it until we're blue in our face. That's more Mercurial function. The Sun, depending on the sign it is in, is going to be more like that higher awareness, right? That gives us a sense of more of a, you know, what is that sort of overarching idea as to why we are here on this planet in the first place and what energy, what frequency we need to be holding, okay, as well. So this slide is also helpful. Your Mercury transmission method, and then also includes learning and unlearning. So in particular for also not just what you need to learn. And some of these, by the way, may surprise you. This is from my experience, not from any books or anything like that, really from my experience. So some of these have even surprised me, but once again is what I'm seeing over and over. Is the unlearning is not necessarily directly always connected to the sign that you would expect. So for example, what I'm finding with Mercury in Sagittarius, the unlearning is not so much about, let's say, you know, unlearning to be overly idealistic or something. No, it's actually to unlearn skepticism and then not speaking out. So like the unwillingness to speak out. Okay, so anyway, I'm gonna invite you to explore that and maybe just be with that and as always, let me know how that works. These are just the slides on the Sun through signs and the medicine of your Sun. Just a couple of those slides that you have already seen in the Sun and Moon integrated work class. And then some examples, finally, that we can see how this is meant to work and how it beautifully and powerfully works. So remember your Mercury function, right? Your mind as a tool, your message, if you like, is meant to be in service. It's meant to inform and then serve your solar function. So here I've got Richard Branson. We haven't seen his chart for a while here. So I circled here, right, as you're going to see, Sun and Mercury are always fairly close to each other. In Richard Branson's case, it's Sun in Cancer and Mercury in Leo in the 12th house. So let's just be with that for a moment. So what would you expect here from this Mercury in Leo? What is his sort of primary, right? Like that radio antenna, if you like, how he perceives reality, how he learns. Would you expect, right, somebody with Mercury in Leo to like, right, to laugh, to, to be more spontaneous about their learning, to learn through creativity? Now, it is in the 12th house. That definitely adds another important intuitive layer here. But that sun in Cancer, absolutely, it's like a double compassion and unconditional love, right? And that sort of intuitive and meditative factor here added with that sun in Cancer in the 12th. And remember, Mercury, which is the, fun, happy, it's the daily strategy connected with fun, happiness, right? Happy lifestyle. I'm having a time of my life kind of attitude that needs to inform and serve the sun in Cancer in the 12th. And with the sun in Cancer in the 12th, what, I've got here in the brackets, the bigger picture of, that's what I want you to keep in mind, right? So the sun sees the bigger picture, and Mercury informs Richard Branson, right, about the daily, what's the best daily strategy to go about life, okay? So it's in a little bit more of a spontaneous attitude, but the sun ultimately says, we are here to create here some sort of soul alignment, right, or to create a cozy hub, just the way how I expressed it here. I mean, there are many other ways that you may be guided to express that, and right, because we have the 12th house is about soul alignment, and he's got Cancer there through the sun, and also it's on the cusp, but primarily through sun in Cancer. Cancer is always about creating that sort of sense of belonging, right? So creating a cozy hub, creating a really aligning and really spending time, right, with the soul, self. Why did I put self here? Also because sun represents the self, and it's in the 12th. So now it sounds a little, very archetypal, but I also want you to think about then when you've got that leadership archetype in the 12th, what that also could represent, like all, the different expressions. So so for him, it's also bringing that family, and then actually, as we know, right, translates into, for him, bringing leaders in on that particular island that he created on his leadership retreats and so on and so forth, right, in a very Leo-like style. So the daily strategy will depend on the sign house of natal Mercury, and so you want to, so Mercury in Sag, Capricorn, and Aquarius may have more of a longer term. So even though I'm referring to it as a daily strategy, when it comes to Mercury, it's not like one size fits all. Mercury in Capricorn, wherever you have Capricorn, is always going to be about the longer term. So even though we would expect Mercury to be very mercurial in anywhere, it is maybe not going to be as mercurial in Capricorn. It still is going to be concerned more with a plan, more with a more of a some sort of longer term direction. Okay, so keep that in mind. And here, he's got a Virgo on the 3rd house cusp. So, and we've used his example many times in other courses in the past, so some of you have seen this, right? Just to see some of the books that he has written, how they are an expression of that Virgo in the 3rd and Mercury in Leo rising, right? Losing my virginity, how I've survived, had fun, and made a fortune doing my way, right? The key point here is I've survived, right, and had fun. He really, really very much made a point of that, which you would expect, right? That could be both Leo rising, but also because he's written a book about it, I would say. And by the way, it's also that Mercury is important because it's the ruler of the 3rd. So Virgo in the 3rd ruled by Mercury in Leo. So for him, what he's meant to write about and speak about has both Virgo, primarily from a Virgo, which is more practical perspective. So that's always a primary focus, but also give some fun to it. And this is exactly how he is presented. He actually, and it's interesting enough, right? He talks about virginity, and Virgo obviously is a symbol that's connected with virgin, right? That's represented by virgin. So that may be completely, obviously unbeknownst to him, but nonetheless, it is right there. And he made a point of that, having fun as well. So then he also said, 14 lessons on making it to the top while having fun and staying green. Right there, Leo and Virgo, which is very much about clean and healthy and green living. Now, like a virgin, secrets they want to teach you at a business school. So you see that business school, that's very much Virgo. But then you see that ruler of the third is in the 12th of secrets. So now this doesn't have to be necessarily sharing secrets. This could have been sharing some sort of intuitive wisdom, some spiritual information as well. But because he's got Virgo primarily on the third, he knows that what he's got to share is got to be related, if not practical, to day, then, right, business, school, interestingly enough, connected, right? So the Virgin way, again, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. Like, can you get any more Leo and Virgo than that? The Playboy interview, the Playboy, that's a Leo. Let's not screw it, let's just do it. Anyway, there's a little bit about how he expresses his message from early on. We must work hard to change all this. That's Virgo. I always looked at my business not just as a money-making machine, but as an adventure that can, I hope, make people better off. I'm passionate about many things, but conserving our planet and its species is a high priority. So he's already telling us, right, that conserving planet, which is very Virgo. And then the 12th house, in my experience, is very much connected with that connection, that experience, the connection with all of the species, if you like, and creatures on the planet. Okay. And then he says, we'll keep using our collective voice at Virgin to influence others, to share our vision of a more equal world while everyone can enjoy the same rights. Now, this is more of a, he's got a Virgo on the third, but when you hear people talk about equality, that's a Libra talking, potentially Venus, but most likely would be Libra, and he actually has a big part of a Libra, including Mars and Neptune in the third. So it's a modifier. Okay. So hopefully you can see that again. Very importantly here to see how, like you see, especially in these cases, and so this is now just a different person, but actually the same, just so you can see how that can work now for the different positioning of the Sun and Mercury in the same sign, which is, we've got Marianne Williamson. So again, the Sun in Cancer in the first and the second house, because it's close to that, very close to that second house cusp. So compassionate, heart-based living. That's what I've got, right? That's the Sun in Cancer. Compassionate Cancer living, the Sun, okay? And needs to be informed and heart-based living, right? Because it is... we're talking about the Sun. So ideally for everybody, it would be that, but this is especially so, I find, for Cancer and Leo. And is informed by Mercury in Leo in the third. And so now this is interesting because I haven't seen a lot of Marianne Williamson's movies and videos and so on and so forth, but from what I've seen, about her, she's not always very perky and smiley. Like, it's not necessarily something that I would connect with her, right? That Mercury and Leo, we would typically expect like more of a joker and a comedian, and so on and so forth. And so maybe more with Richard Branson, even though in his case it's in the 12th, right? So it's a little bit more subdued. But what is interesting, one of the core energies that Leo represents is love. And by the way, it's also very political too, meaning it's really where we need to be willing to be liked and do what it takes sometimes, and that's to perform, play a role, right? Build the bridges to a performance and or build those political skills that will help us to achieve certain goals. This is when we overdo that, it can also look fake and so on and so forth, but it's a very, very helpful, obviously, skill to have. So both Cancer and Leo are political, like I've got here. And so she has, you see, both Sun and Mercury are in those two signs. And so she's got a Leo in the third. So Leo in the third and Mercury in the third. And I've got here Return to Love, just because I know that's one of her books. But so you can see how that can work in other different ways. But it's basically coming back to that core idea of the third house and Mercury, okay? And in terms of here, our messaging. And then again, starts at the ascendant. And then here, as you can see, the Sun and Mercury and then the third house, the Sun really needs to oversee that. So let's say in Marianne's case, that Sun in Cancer is the overarching idea here, which for her, you see, I've got everything that's in blue is more either more, water signs. So she's got here healing the soul of America. That's America is actually Cancer, right? It's born in July, so it has Sun in Cancer. So you heard me say this before, right? There is a reason that people with strong Cancer in their chart, including Donald Trump and so on and so forth, are very passionate about, not everybody, but generally speaking, that is when they're writing about it, I'm usually looking for, or speaking about it in very specific terms, is usually because they have some strong Cancer in their chart, okay? So Enchanted Love, the mystical power, intimate relationships. But, she's got a number of books. Actually, one of her latest one, if not the latest one, is A Politics of Love. A Politics of Love. There is it's not just love, which is, her mega bestseller was A Return to Love. Again, just to show you how not just what we're meant to write about, but really some of the most popular and most aligned, really what we're really most meant to write about and speak about is really meant to be informed by our, especially that part of the design that's connected with the third house and Mercury and the ruler of the third, okay? A Politics of Love, a handbook for a new American revolution. Okay, that's to me very much integration of her Sun in Cancer and Leo. By the way, again, Cancer, very political sign. So because it's connected with tradition, it's connected with home, right? So people that have a strong fourth house or Cancer are very much concerned with preservation of tradition. And also it's very poetic too. So just some of Marianne's quotes, in fact, some of the ones that are on her website right now, and even just her latest that I've found this on her website for Marianne for the president, I believe. Is that I forget exactly what it says. And she says, American politics today is disconnected from the heart. Our economic system is disconnected from the heart. Our criminal justice system is disconnected from the heart. Our educational system is disconnected from the heart. Our national, and so on and so, where there's no heart, there's no wisdom. What are the chances that somebody who has Mercury in Leo and third house Leo is going to be speaking about the importance of, returning to love, and even in this particular here position of really, reaching masses in terms of being in the running for the president. And even like a lot of the, stuff here, love everywhere increases the love everywhere. These are basically the only 4 quotes actually that I found on her, that part of this aspect of the website where the quotes are. By the way, Cancer is very much connected with connecting with our soul, both Pisces and Cancer. So when people are speaking about surrender and, flow, that's more Pisces, and then allowing, God to breathe you into his plans for a better world. This to me is Sun in Cancer. Although I just want to take a look at that. Of course, she has Pisces on the midheaven, okay? So that's also where that spiritual aspect comes very, very much and works for her. But, you know, speaking about the alignment with basically the right, the highest light and God and so on and so forth. Okay, so neither intellectual argument nor mere traditional strategizing will be not enough to save us. Only a deeper whole person conversation that emerges from the soul, tapping into a higher frequency of love for each other, and so on and so on. Anyway, you can explore that a little bit more, but just so hopefully you can see how these core quotes from her website and the most popular book that she has written very much the representation of her core design, that, you know, what I call that messaging harmonic. And Dalai Lama, we have already seen his chart, right? Sun and Mercury, but now instead of Mercury and Leo, even though he has Venus in Leo and he has Leo on the 3rd, he has Mercury in Gemini. So he's Mercury in Gemini, which is intuitive info gathering, right? Why? Because it's in the 12th, or you could say meditative. So it's a fast Mercury, but a little bit more, it's a bit more intuitive. It's fast because it's in Gemini, but at the same time, it's going to be a little bit, it's gonna, you know, we're going to expect it to be a little bit sort of more tuned in than a typical Mercury in Gemini, because it literally like has to swim right through those mental waves have to actually swim through a more meditative way of being. So that intuitive and both logical Mercury informs and serves that Sun in Cancer. So, you know, if this was Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Cancer, it would have been a different situation. You know, more, the chances are he would have been maybe even more teaching and, you know, and preaching and so on and so forth. But because Sun is in Cancer, and it's close to the ascendant, Dalai Lama, he realized that he needs to be embodying what he is talking about. And this is, again, compassionate, heart-based living. Okay? What is his key perspective for teaching and speaking and dialoguing? Okay? Again, love, happiness, heart-centeredness. This is exactly what he teaches about, even when he's, you know, doing his interfaith work here in the 9th and so on and so forth. Pretty much, you can very, very much see him making a point of, you know, putting a big smile on and, you know, making people laugh and so on and so forth. So bringing some lightheartedness, okay? And so his transmission, or Dalai Lama's transmission here, is really giving voice to the heart, right? Giving voice, that's the 3rd house, to that heart. And for unity and of all living things and spiritual good of all. This is because of Mercury in the 12th. Just a way how I've combined here his 3rd house and then Mercury. Again, you can combine this and integrate this in different other ways. And we've seen this before, like when I have leisure time, I spend some of it reading and studying. As well as reading on my favorite subjects like compassion and altruism, and that, which is the 12th, right? It's the 12th house. On those days when I spend a few hours getting some understanding, I feel fulfilled. I feel as if I have made good use of my time. So obviously he's real, you know, we do need to fulfill our mercurial function. How does he know truth? When he hears it, right? It's Mercury in Gemini, learns and knows by reading, writing, listening, teaching. And also because it's in the 12th house, it adds that spiritual awareness into, and then because it's in Gemini, also the dialogue and conversation. Okay? A little bit more here that you can explore. Also Dalai Lama's books, based on his Leo III, The Art of Happiness, The Good Heart, right? The Compassionate Life. This is the Sun in Cancer and Cancer rising. But again, an open heart, the heart of compassion, okay? The essence of the Heart Sutra. Essence is, I place essence in I place essence in Virgo, even though there is the vibrational essence also connected. I'm going to scroll here in Pisces. And okay. Yeah, so Marianne and Dalam had that similar, so that Leo in the third, but I wanted to show you here was that he has that moon and Neptune in the third as well. And because it's moon, right, as well, but it's that here integrated moon and Neptune, which is really meditative more. This is a practical moon that loves habituality and routine, and you know what Dalai calls the emotional hygiene and mental hygiene, interconnected, right? And which is why he meditates. Likely, that's a big important part of that process. And that actually allows him to do what? To connect with the essence of the Heart Sutra. But can you see how many heart, happiness, and a Leo, basically really associations he's got here in terms of what he is talking and teaching. Again, the art of happiness at work. There you go, right? Happiness at work. Virgo is work. And happiness I place with a Leo. Again, the heart essence of the great perfection. I actually associate great as an descriptive or descriptor with a Leo. How to expand love, widening the circle of loving relationships. The Book of Joy. There is another Leo archetype. These are pretty much the majority of the books that he has written. Now remember our Rosa Parks, and so if we just look at her third house, Aries, and remember we talked about that Mars right on her ascendant and resilient and resistant, right? Capricorn right on the ascendant, the first thing that people see, and that Mars rising is very much almost like having that Aries rising. But while she doesn't have Aries, she has Mars there, she does have Aries on the third house. So in terms of her key perspective and point of view, that Aries, which is about basic rights and very, action-oriented or activism-oriented, if you like, is it needs to be part of that conversation and her platform, okay? So she talked about here, I had been pushed as far as I could stand to be pushed. I decided that I would have to know once and for all rights I had as a human. This is all of Aries. It's like, I'm not going to be pushed, right? Opportunity for me to take a stand and so on and so forth. And then she also founded an institute for self-development. That's very much Aries, okay? Our Oprah with her sun in Aquarius and Mercury in Aquarius, both in the second house, but just keeping in mind that that Mercury, once again, needs still that creative thinker, innovative mind, and the humanitarian still needs to be very much in service to that solar focus, right? Which is always going to be bigger. The solar focus is always going to be bigger than a mercurial focus can ever be, even when they are in the same sign. And then interesting here from her messaging perspective, right? It is that third house Pisces here that she needs to blend in with her Sagittarius, right? That very positive, and it's about gratitude and obviously a well-educated and standing in her claiming her teacher perspective. But this third house, Pisces, is the teacher of spirituality. Okay, now we can see how that's a process that she is, right? May not have been the same, the first thing that we would have said about her earlier on, but absolutely this is by bringing on all the guests, right? From that personal development field and spiritual field, like she's absolutely become very much an icon in that direction. So hopefully you can see how that plays into but while really her second house is all of this, is the media, this is the television, Aquarius, right? This is the innovation and so on and so forth, and wealth building. This is where really her strengths are. So Oprah's books with her Pisces on the 3rd. And by the way, Jupiter as ruler of the 3rd is in Gemini, right, in the 6th. And then, yeah, so primarily Pisces there. So, for example, she did write about food, health, and happiness. It's interesting when I see people, people have written about stuff that it's not necessarily a reflection of their 3rd, like something that's really obvious. May not have been like the best of what they had to offer. But remember those super soul Sundays? That's very much connected with Pisces, right? And the wisdom of Sundays, and the wisdom is something that we connect with Pisces, in particular spiritual wisdom, journey to beloved, and a journal. These are the two principles here that are connected with Gemini. That's the Jupiter in journal would be something that we are doing on a regular basis. That's the 6th house, okay? And beloved is a Libra, so that would be her here, midheaven in Libra, okay? Which makes them that there will be journey, because it's the 10th house is really what we are meant to strive for in terms of our sort of overall life mission, okay? Now, here's an example of Ellen DeGeneres similar to Oprah, with that Sun, Venus in Aquarius in the 2nd, but now this is Mercury, not in Aquarius, Mercury in Capricorn. Now, you wouldn't necessarily expect Mercury in Capricorn, would you, in a chart of a comedian? So talk about paradoxes. But what gives her that, right, that sort of prime, that really the first that you see, right, is like, again, you see Ellen, and, most people, like, it just really puts a smile on their face. That's Sagittarius. Sagittarius is very much connected also with, again, that sort of jovial attitude. And then, but that Mercury in Capricorn really says that, tells me that how she processes information is in a more conservative way, meaning like she's, and I do believe that she has had her periods, right, where she has, obviously because of everything that she's experienced, and after coming out as well as lesbian and so on and so forth. And I think probably even before that, with all the fame and everything else, right, she would have had to, she's definitely, related to really learning and connecting in a more pragmatic way. But what I did not know until just years back, when I started working with her chart in our courses here, is that the books that she's written, for example, one of the books that I've chosen here is Seriously, I'm Kidding. Seriously, I'm Kidding. So there is that serious part to her. Another serious part to her, by the way, she has Aquarius in the 3rd, is, and 3rd is here in this description, if we read that I found on CTV, a description of her show, is very, very much this Aquarian 3rd house, right? Which is that key energy that she has to bring in her communication and messaging. It says Emmy award-winning comedian and writer, best-selling author, actor, and television pioneer. Television is connected with Aquarius, and then media with Pisces. So they both share that. And she brings her unique brand of hilarity to daytime talk, right? So that unique, which we know absolutely there is something unique. There's really, truly not many people can do the way the daytime, talk in the way that she does, with a dazzling array of celebrity interviews, an eclectic mix, right? Various eclectic, if not eccentric, and ordinary people with extraordinary stories. So she's bringing extraordinary stories to us. She creates fun and unpredictable alternative. These are two Aquarius descriptors right beside each other, right? An unpredictable alternative in daytime television, and takes a fresh look at the world, according to Ellen. Really fresh look at the world. That's very much Sagittarius. So really bringing that Sagittarius and Aquarius here with, interestingly, a grounded the way how she actually views reality, and you can, and I know this is a paradox that a lot of comedians, had to, um, basically work with, right? Is that a lot of them actually are, in many ways, actually have a tendency, they have that sort of Saturnian perspective, that's not as jovial, and it's almost like, that laughter, the comedy has become a way to not just to express themselves, but actually to cope, right, and deal with how they've dealt with life, right? And we've known this, right, with several comedians and so on and so forth, that we've been blessed to know about. And then the book number 2 was about home. So apparently Ellen has bought and renovated nearly a dozen homes over the last 25 years and describes her real estate and decorating adventures and education. And again, she could have been renovating homes and not write about it, not talk about it. But the fact that she has Mercury in Capricorn, there is that not just serious and pragmatic, but very much, connected with basically her inner builder, if not her inner architect. Okay. And then she said, you don't have to have money to have good taste, and so on and so forth. So, you can very, very much see. And another well-loved person also that with a Mercury in Capricorn, unfortunately, we do not know Michelle Obama's time of birth. So, but what we do know, based on what we've learned today, is that, to see that integration between the sun, her sun and Mercury, which they both happen to be in Capricorn. So now when you look at it, right, what she is known for and how she handles herself, and once again, we don't know her rising sign, that would tell us a lot in terms of really that first impression. I wouldn't be surprised if against either Libra or, that more Venusian and really fashion-oriented a rising sign was present there. But again, we don't know that, but she still has Moon, Venus, right? 2 feminine archetypes that are together. That really is what gives her a fashion sense. But when she speaks, right, definitely has that weightiness to it. It has weight. It has credibility. Again, we don't know her 3rd house here, but again, we know her Mercury and we know her Sun. So even just based on this, let's say you are working, you're reading somebody's chart that you don't know really the time of birth, that alone can also give you information in terms of really how to basically, what needs to inform their core transmission here. So when, in her memoir, it's called On Becoming, which is a work of deep reflection and mesmerizing storytelling, Michelle Obama invites readers into her world, chronicling the experiences that have shaped her. That's very Capricorn. And she describes her triumphs and her disappointments. This is very Capricorn. In Capricorn, we're really learning how to appreciate, right, all of the stuff that didn't really work as well, right, all of the hard stuff in life, and then also then what brought us to where we are today. So it's becoming the deeply personal reckoning of a woman of soul and substance, a woman of substance, right, who has steadily defied expectations. Can you feel that Capricornian, right, and just in that one sentence, that gravity to what and because this is obviously she would have, I'm not exactly sure if this was, I found this on Amazon, it may have been, so this may have been already, right, edited by her or approved by her, but the chances are, right, this is how a lot of people would describe her, and hopefully that makes sense. And as First Lady, Obama served as a role model for women and worked, right, role modeling is very much, right, especially from that very much role model for what is possible and for, hard work and so on and so forth, is very Capricorn. So I worked as an advocate for poverty. She supported American designers and was considered a fashion icon. So this is her stepping into what she wants to be also known for. Now, obviously, this is, not, maybe that's necessarily not what she wants to be known for, but that's basically what she's also transmitting. So to me, when I look at that, her fashion sense and her Mercury in Capricorn, to me, it's also really helping young women to really to how they carry themselves, right? And it's about building that sort of sense of self-respect. That's sort of what I get out of that, okay? Because when I see that sun in Capricorn, it's almost, when people say don't dress for the job that you want or career you want, rather for the career that you have or job that you have, but for the job that you want, right? So that's sort of something like that. And the media has been criticized for focusing more on First Lady's fashion sense than her serious contributions. You bet your money that Sun in Capricorn is here to make some serious contributions. Now, there are typically higher expectations for people in terms of how being in their integrity and so on and so forth. And people know that. And I usually advise people with Sun in Capricorn, making sure that they're not taking any shortcuts and so on and so forth. Thinking here, Justin Trudeau in particular, we looked at his chart many times in the past, and I brought that point. And now in this age of accountability, right, with Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, we can really, really see how people with Sun in Capricorn are held. There's a lot of expectation that they pretty much, again, cross all the T's and dot all I's. Here's another example of that Mercury in Capricorn, and this is Pope Francis with Virgo on the 3rd and Mars in Libra there. So just really briefly here, but that Mercury in Capricorn needs to be in service to the Sun in Sagittarius, right? So this is very idealistic, and also you could say religious, right? Education, cosmopolitan, Sun in Sagittarius in the 6th. So this is very much his part of the duty and his daily work, and that's really Sagittarius is also very much about helping us to shape or even really expand our belief system. So the books that he has written, in particular this, I think, I'm not sure if this is one of the last one, it's called Sharing the Wisdom of Time. And you can really see the picture, right, of an elder on the cover. That's Mercury in Capricorn, and he knows, right, with that Mercury in Capricorn, that's what people do want, that some sort of wise perspective on the times, and apparently, so Sharing the Wisdom of Time is an international effort that collects the stories of elders from over 30 countries, carved from lifetime experience, right? Very, very Capricornian, and every story is a testament to the power of faith, which is Sagittarius. He's Sun in Sagittarius, perseverance. Right, so that Sun in Sagittarius is really the higher purpose. The overreaching purpose is to embrace faith, okay, and then perseverance. The perseverance, resilience is in service to that. And then here they've got the experience of lived wisdom. Our grandparents and elders can guide the leaders of tomorrow to move forward creatively and confidently as they envision a future of hope. That's Sun in Sagittarius, envisioning a future of hope. So that Mercury, right, the wisdom of time, the sharing these stories is to really give a future, to help basically to the future leaders, right, to really envision a future of hope. The testimony of our elders will help us to look above the horizon and see the stars. You can see, I hope you can see as I do, this beautiful integration of how the Pope Francis has integrated that Mercury with Sun and North Node in Sagittarius. Meaning this, again, the stories are in service to this higher goal rather than vice versa. Okay? And one of the last examples, Einstein with Mercury and in Mercury, Saturn in Aries in the 10th, needs to inform the Sun in Pisces in the 10th. And there are a number of here quotes and writing which you can explore on your own. And we know him obviously as a scientist. Would you have expected to see Einstein with Sun in Pisces, or like Tony Robbins, right? Not necessarily, but that is here his solar focus. And yes, unified field theory, which if I had to place that in the chart, would be in Pisces, actually is one of the it's obviously physics, but I'm placing that as very much an expression of his Sun in Pisces. Again, we wouldn't necessarily place maybe a scientific mind to have that sun in Pisces, but again, sun is what we're growing to become. And he did express numerous times, many times, his appreciation for intuition and inspiration and imagination. In fact, saying imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. It's strictly speaking a real factor in scientific research, right? A real factor in scientific research. So he is very, very much here using the function of his solar focus, which is more inspiration and intuition and imagination oriented. Okay? And you can see this in his quotes, right? When he says the most beautiful and most profound emotion, and by the way, he's got Cancer rising. Okay? So the most beautiful and most profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. How is that for Sun in Pisces? It's the sower of all true science. There is a perspective on science from a Sun in Pisces, right? From a great mind. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. Bingo! But again, keep in mind that this comes from a Sun in Pisces. So he's literally telling us here that he's integrated again, Mercury in Aries, which, if he was only identifying with Mercury in Aries, this would be, by the way, Aries is technical. So is connected with, and also obviously having our own, very much important to have our own ideas and speak more directly. But you can see how he's very much by integrating that with intuitive mind, which is also what has given him the edge and likely has allowed him not just to be known for the ideas that he has created, but also to be very prolific and productive. That's also because of Mercury Saturn, by the way. Because if this was just Mercury in Aries, there could have been a lot of talk and a lot of, look at me, and maybe not necessarily a lot of productivity. But there is that Mercury, because it's not necessarily about productivity. Mercury in Aries is like, you gotta hear me. I've got things that I need to say, and they are my ideas, basically, and basically this is how we need to express ourselves. Okay, but Mercury in the 10th, aligned with Saturn, and also Sun in Pisces, really need to be part of that conversation. Okay. God does not care about our mathematical difficulties. He integrates empirically. Oh my goodness, when I saw this. God does not care about our mathematical difficulties. He integrates empirically, right? By observation. So I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are details. So can you see how that Sun in Pisces is really speaking through that he's realizing that solar focus, his solar focus, is where he's really accessing the divine in his, because that's how it is in his, the rest are details. So again, details is basically what we access through our mercurial function. We've seen Angelina's chart before, so where her, creating dialogue and increasing social impact, that Mercury needs to be in service to her Sun in Gemini. Sun in Gemini is always going to have a bigger message, okay? And Mercury in Gemini is the information gatherer. So that engagement and deeper listening and learning really need to be in service here to what is a bigger solar message or bigger impact in the 11th. And she has Virgo on the 3rd, which is that conservation and environment-oriented message. Now, it can be for Richard Branson, it's similar, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be this for everybody, but in my experience, people that are really aware, that are making big impact, awaken to this higher expression of Virgo, okay? It can be like, let's say, very practical, down-to-earth, healing-oriented, health-oriented, wellness-oriented message. And then just looking at Angelina's transmission with the Mercury, right, her message, and really what she's here to share. and communicate, so giving voice for the greater good, right? For the good of people and larger community, and the planet and the environment, because of Virgo on the 3rd. How does she know truth? Again, similar to Dalai Lama, when she hears it, when she writes it, when she reads books and listens to her friends and so on and so forth. But this is interesting. She says, but I am at least smart enough to surround myself with really intelligent people who I listen to and I rely on. So she's actually telling us how she is learning, which is very much confirmed by her Mercury, not just in Gemini, but it's in the 11th. So she learns from listening to her friends, right? And really, really intelligent people. That's very Gemini, right? Who I listen to and I rely on. Okay. And you can see here, one of her key transmission was the book that she has written. I mean, she's created a lot as well in terms of other work that she's done, but notes from my travels, visits with refugees in Africa, Cambodia, Pakistan, and Ecuador. And then just in the way how you can see it's not just even the titles and the themes, but even the method, right? When she says, many nights I sat awake reading stories and statistics about national and international tragedies. So it's the stories, and that's very Gemini, right? The facts, witnessing, right? Documenting. I'm not writing for the people, for the person who may read these pages, but for the people I will be writing about. That's the impact. That's the 11th house. And then her Sun Mercury integrated expression. I'm learning more effectively to hear, understand, know, and express. So I've got here dialogue, listening, and what is factual. This is from the slides. So she's learning to be more effective in dialogue, right? Because of her Mercury in Gemini. What for? So that she can cultivate the new experiences and creations connected with creating social connections, developing influence. This is Sun in the 11th, and then operate in service to the path, service to humanity, because of Sun in the 11th. So basically, I'm playing here with different applications, again, based on the slides of that Sun by sign and house. I'm increasing my vitality and energy daily by creating a large community, connecting with friends, causes, groups, influencers. I am excited to experience more community and community building while continually learning how to make a difference in the world, right? Making a difference in the world. This is the 11th house, speaking to a larger community. Right, there's a lot of that because she's got both Sun and Mercury in the 11th. I'm growing to become an eloquent humanitarian. That's Gemini in the 11th, right? Mercury in Gemini, rather Sun in Gemini in the 11th, so that I can create more of, right, the basically the, being that messenger and creating more of the stories and storytelling and obviously documenting, and she's created movies as well, and so on and so forth. And while unlearning, what is it that she's unlearning in the process? Unlearning a negative thinking and fragmenting mental energy. This could be, for example, focusing on too many things at once, or again, in my experience with that, a Mercury in Gemini, important to right through that multitasking and being, willing to be in that curiosity to unlearn that sort of inner doubt and so on and so forth. Okay. So the guidelines for your Sun and Mercury integration, very similar to what we've talked about so far. The difference here is in the step number 5, and that is that I want you, when you're doing this particular exercise, to pay attention to your thinking and breathing more, which is a mercurial function. Again, there are many more mercurial functions, but thinking and breathing are the ones that we can recognize readily. And then you're illuminating, I'm calling it here, you're illuminating awakening consciousness, right? So if, for example, if you're doing this and you start falling asleep, the chances are, well, unless you have Mercury in Pisces or the 12th house, you're not allowed to fall asleep while you're doing this exercise. I'm joking and I'm not, okay? But hope you're getting a sense here. Obviously, it's not just about physically falling asleep. It's also about being present to your right, being in your heart presence, and to this, having that sort of sense of self, and basically having a sense of why you're doing that in the first place. Why you're even taking this course. Why you're even listening to this information. What are you getting out of that? Your sun sign. You want to look at that. That if you need to be reminded of that sort of overreaching why, you want to be doing things that are going to help you to create experiences that help you to honor your solar consciousness and illuminate it more and awaken that. Okay. This is a slide, right? A very basic one where you can do just what we have done with the sun and the moon last time. So you can play with that here. And then also just in the end, the slides for your, with prompts that I have shared through Angelina's example of your Sun Mercury integrated expression, and then a more clean slide. And in the end, we have arrived with your quiz and reflection questions for the class number 3. What are your 3 learning priorities of your Mercury sign? What are 3 unlearning priorities of your Mercury sign? In a reflection question number 1, what perspective, platform, or theme will help you reach more audience and express yourself more fully? So you're going to have to identify that it's connected. So hint, connected with your 3rd house. In a reflection number question number 2, what aspect of your Sun Mercury integration makes sense as you do this and when you finish that exercise? And then what aspect does not make sense yet? Okay, so it's important to understand that. And your journaling exercise number 3 are basically the prompts that we have had in the slide on Sun Mercury integration that I've just gone through Angelina Jolie's example, just highlighted here so that it's easier for your journaling. So I'm increasing my vitality and energy daily by, creating experiences that are aligned with your sun sign. I'm excited to experience more while continually learning how to more effectively, so this is going to be a combination of your sun and Mercury. I'm growing to become my solar expressions, your best version of myself, so that I can create more of that aligned with your sun sign and house, while readily unlearning, fill in the blanks in the process of becoming. This is your own becoming. Okay. Ta-da! So your next steps for homework number 3, once again, working on your Sun Mercury integration discovery and journaling on any of the new insights you gained based on the previous slide with those journaling prompts. And see you next time for your video class number 4 on healing the father-mother image on your self-realization path. So thank you very much for listening. Hope this served and inspired you to really dive deeper and gain an ever greater understanding of why it is important that we lead our lives based on our solar focus, and how that mercurial focus and really our mercurial learning really needs to inform that overarching perspective, okay, and awareness. So with that said, once again, thank you for listening, and we are going to connect again very soon. Bye for now.